Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Qur'an.com. Today is Tuesday the 5th of March 2019, and today I just want to share a few thoughts briefly about YouTube and obituaries. I know that the connection between the two might not be immediately obvious, but what I found myself thinking was that in pre-internet age, obituaries, which is a genre in which I have quite a lot of interest. When you read an obituary, it's usually somebody's best attempt to try to make somebody else's life look like it was worth living. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. I've read a lot of obituaries in my life, and quite often you can feel the emptiness sort of seeping through the cracks in the presentation. At other times, not. People are always nice about others who have died, and sometimes it just doesn't seem to be completely justified. I remember a particular obituary I read about 5 or 6 years ago, which was in a small town paper, and this is a paper with very small circulation, and it was an obituary not about a famous person at all, but about a woman who'd lived a very modest life. She'd grown up in the local village. I don't think she'd ever been past 100 miles away from where she lived. She joined the local Methodist church. She married Frank or Bob or whatever. She worked in the local post office. And as I read this obituary, I realized after a while that she lived a very successful life, actually, in terms of the real picture, the big picture, in terms of God and the last day and so on. Obituaries were a sort of first resort for people who had curiosity about fatality, about mortality. Anyway, moving past that to the YouTube thing, in the Qur'an it's very clear. It talks about the people who have come and gone in previous generations, and we are to consider those and to put our own mortality into perspective on the basis of that. And I just made a few notes. I'm just going to refer to them as I go. But it seems to me that YouTube, it provides all kinds of different sort of resources, but it's providing for those who wish to access this. It's almost like obituary squared. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that in previous generations, you would just have not photographs even, but portraits, maybe statues of the people who had preceded. And then if you move forward into the late 1800s, you'd have photographs. And then at the beginning of the 20th century, I suppose you'd have a little bit going into the 1920s, 1930s, you have newsreels and so on, and then films and so on. But now you can see someone get old almost in real time. I'll give you some examples. If you go onto YouTube, you can see Elvis Presley, for example, who was phenomenally famous. If you're 20, you may not appreciate how stunningly famous Elvis Presley was. And at the time when I wasn't alive when he was at the top of his game. I was 10 when he died in 1977, I think it was. So, but he was still, as when I was a little boy, he was still very famous and the king of rock and roll, as it were. And all other people like this. You've got Freddie Mercury, Muhammad Ali, David Bowie, Bob Marley, Michael Jackson. These are just to name, sort of people in the limelight, as well as actors and actresses. All of whom, they reached their peak. They were incredibly successful. The world was sort of bowing before them and giving them all of this adulation. And then they either died suddenly or went into decline slowly. And died. And YouTube serves the offices of an obituary, in the sense that you can quite easily go onto YouTube and in a couple of hours get a fairly good visual sense of the life of Elvis Presley, from the time when he was this beautiful young man with a phenomenal voice. He always had a phenomenal voice, through to the last couple of years of his life and his decline and so on. And likewise for countless politicians, businessmen, people that the world, worships, for want of a better word. And you can see on YouTube, like any 12-year-old with a couple of hours to spare can see the full transit from dust to dust, and in a way that has never been possible before. And to my mind, this is what the Qur'an would refer to as a sign. It's giving you a perspective that you can draw upon, and on the basis of which it's possible to make real life decisions. So that was just that thought, and I think it's particularly accessible for the youth. Why? Because normally, like pre-internet age, pre-television and all of that, but certainly pre-internet, you needed to have lived about as much as I have in order to have seen people decline and fall. Because when you're young, when you're 14, when you're 20, and you see somebody at the top of their game, it all seems amazing. But give it another 20 years, quite often you see where people end up. And what YouTube does is give us, and give young people particularly, the opportunity to gain that perspective without having to live to 50 years old. Before you see how the mighty are fallen, and they invariably fall, and everybody dies, and there are no exceptions. Obviously, when the big rock stars and pop stars and actors and so on die, everybody makes this big fuss, but they're soon forgotten, and they are in whatever they sent before them. That's all they've got now. There are no exceptions. There's no VIP lounge, the other side of death. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think that YouTube and obituaries, but YouTube really makes this clear. And I just wanted to share that because I think it's a relevant and potentially important thought. And that's all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Qur'an alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.